Good, man. Well, to the bird situation, there is a sign of a black bird, and I think we looked into this a little bit because from what I remember, not only did a bird fly into your van, which we had to do a official spiritual purge on, but one also flew into your house, I believe, the same week.
Exactly. And it was the day before my 50th birthday, like a year
That's right.
ago in December.
Yeah,
So,
man.
I was Googling things, trying to figure out what that meant. And I saw you and I was like, Josh, help me, please.
Man, how have the vibrations been at your house since then? Have they recovered? Were they ever damaged? What was the deal?
Everything turned out fine, but I was sure spooked for a while. I think you helped me out there. I appreciate
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, not a thing in the world. Here's the thing, buddy. We manifest our own universes. So if you were to see it as a negative sign, it would have quickly become a negative sign.
Exactly.
But I'll say one thing I've learned about you is you're one of the most you've got a really stable but very artistic and dynamic mind, and you tend to be an optimist. Is that correct?
I would say that. Yeah, I mean, I have my moments, but I don't. I'll tell you this: I get very uncomfortable around really negative people.
Yeah.
It makes me crazy. I can't hang around with negative people. I feel like it starts to get inside me and attacks my cells. You know what I mean?
I understood. Well, I know you've worked with hundreds of different artists, and I'm curious. Sometimes within the business context, when you're dealing, because I know the record industry types and the crazy musician types aren't necessarily shining examples of optimism and love. So in that situation, as a guy who's not necessarily tuned to that, how do you break through and still create at the level that you want to create at, or do you feel like there's a real impediment?
What you said. I mean, music is a pretty joyous thing. There are a few curmudgeons along the way, but most of the time when you show up at a session and you want to record some music, people are trying to be on their best behavior and they're trying to be their best creative selves, and they don't want stuff to get drugged down in the mud too far, and it it's a very delicate thing when you're creating and you don't want to kill the vibe. So people are pretty in tune about not wanting to do or say anything that sort of ruins the moment, takes the wind out of the sails.
No, totally understood. So are you saying that a vast majority of the time when you're sitting in the studio, and I know people can get on you, right? They're like,
Oh Lord.
does that ever
Yeah.
work though? Does it ever actually work? Does getting on someone's stuff actually work? Does it actually create the best performance?
Oh Lord. Now, I said this recently, and I've always believed this. I love to help people make their music. I love to make people look as good as possible. I'll do whatever I can in a very, I'm not trying to sound like a martyr, but a very selfless manner to try to make everyone's music as good as possible.
Hmm.
And I've always been that way. I always consider myself like a helper, because I'm not really like the guy who creates the little seeds of ideas. I'm more like a guy who can take somebody else's seed and turn it into something amazing. But like, now when you're working with somebody, I always say there's two things they have to have for me to follow them down any rabbit hole. They either have to be A, very nice, or B, a genius. Sometimes genius types aren't very nice, but if you know that there are amazing, gifted people that really do know a lot about music, I will follow them down a rabbit hole, even if they're a little crass or crude. Now, if a person doesn't have either one of those qualifications, genius or nice, it's very difficult for me to follow them down the rabbit hole. If they condescend me, or if they act like they know more than I do or something, and they're not a genius on top of that, that's when everybody checks out. And I feel like I'm not alone. I think all my session buddies are kind of the same way. You got to be tactful and nice when you're talking to players. You can't say things that are sort of offhanded insults and stuff. You know what I mean?
No, it's true. I mean, we're not going to beat around the bush here. I mean, musicians are also delicate flowers.
Oh Lord!
At the same time, so just the littlest thing can throw the whole vibration deep
Dude,
down into a dirty place.
I'm so insecure. I know all my buddies are insecure. It's a
Yeah,
very delicate place, and I've session players need constant validation too. Like
right.
if they're pouring your hearts out playing and you're trying to make people happy, they, it's nice to get a little encouragement from the other side of the glass where they say, "Great job, lads. Sounds great. Okay, let's just tweak on this and this, but overall it's sounding really good." But if they don't say anything and they give you that ice cold response, like where you can't tell if they hate it or what. I mean, it's very very awkward. So you got to be a little bit of a cheerleader too, just because all those, like you said, all those little egos out there on the other side of the glass are very delicate little flowers, Josh.
Well, it's true, and it's also important to remember that everybody is in their own timeline, is the
Yes,
star of their own show.
yes,
So at the end of the day, when somebody says something offhanded or awkward or odd,
yeah.
do you think that they're actually coming from a negative place, or does the convergence of their day and their background and their history just lead them to say things that are insensitive because to their mind it's not truly insensitive? They have a different they have different training.
I think most of the darkness and the remarks that are not great come from fear. There's so much fear-based recording going on in
Mm,
Nashville, Tennessee, probably across the world. Um, People get freaked out because maybe the session's running a little behind, or maybe this thing that they thought was going to be one thing isn't turning out to be that, and they feel like their back's against the wall, and they get spooked, and they're not really following their hearts, and they start making uh, rash decisions. A lot of musicians are on that, because their musicians are usually their radar for that kind of stuff is very high. And then some, there's a lot of fear-based recording. There's people who are writing songs who don't really believe in the songs they're writing because they're trying to fit them into a box that they feel like they need to be fit into in a very small window of commercial viability. And so when they're afraid to take any chances that take them outside of that window, rightly so, because if they turn in some record that's too artistic to fit into the pop music or the commercial pop country window, then they feel like their record label is going to go, dude, what's this? We can't use
mm.
this. And then it's a waste of money, a waste of time. So there's a lot of that fear-based recording, and I think most of the things where it goes dark in the studio all comes from that.
Mm.
I think that's it.
One way I've been able to pretty much create an artistic barometer for folks during this particular moment when the whole world is shut down is whether or not they can create in this
Right,
moment.
right.
If you can create in this moment, that means that the temporal, thin layered, moment to moment interactions of chemistry and feeling aren't the only thing that drive you, right? Because you're getting so much less interaction, right? We're not going to parties, we're not going to bars, we're not going to events, we're not chopping it up with the regular cross section of humanity that we would.
Right,
And
right.
to me, that says that what, we shouldn't depend on that for our creativity. There is a level of philosophy and historical reflection that I think is so important for music making. I think some of the best music makers um, can do that. So that's been a really kind of interesting thing to watch. And one thing I've been really inspired to see is how prolific you have been in this moment. And at day one of the pandemic, and I heard your interview from 4 days ago where you told the story about your
Yeah,
audio engineer friend pressuring you in to kind of sharing some nuggets to brighten up the world. And it really has achieved that.
thank you, man.
Um, yeah, it's brilliant. How's your creative mind been in
Well,
the midst of this business?
it's been good. I'm married to an amazing singer-songwriter, Sarah Buxton, right? And we had a long talk the other night because she's one of those. I'll get to that, and I'll answer that in a second. But I just wanted to aside very quickly
Yeah,
and
sure.
say, she's one of those collaborator types that she doesn't really play instruments, so she needs to be in a room with people who are playing pianos and guitars to be writing songs, right? She's not really ever been practiced. There's a million songs she's written. It's never been something she could just sit down and do by herself. She always has to collaborate. So she's been suffering, you know, because she tried to do a few Zoom writes with people, and it's very weird. You know, it's like, it's so unnatural. Like, cause you know, it's just a strange, songwriting is a pretty personal thing, right? Whereas in my case, I mean, I've always been a loner, a guitar player, weird childhood, you know, guitar is the perfect escape for a person, you know, who just wants to hole up in a room and get lost on a personal journey for hours and hours. And I still do that to this day, even though I'm 51 now with a family and kids. So I've never had trouble generating something by myself creatively. But I worry about her because she is such a collaborator type, you know, and, you know, so there's that, you know, so I feel like depending on what your role is in our old lives pre-pandemic, are you more of the generator, or are you more of the collaborator? It depends on, you know, that's really very important to how you're handling all this. See?
No, it's true. And when the whole world is on pause, you can just imagine the amount of great songs that are not being made today by those collaborators.
No doubt. And then on the other hand, you know, conversely, I think a lot of people, artists, you know, types of all ilks, you know, not just music, have so much time on their hands now to really think about what they're doing, that I feel like a lot of people are finding themselves, you know, because when you're out in the rat race every day and you're being distracted by, you know, the ordinary goings on in the world, that you know, you don't really have time to sit and look inside. And I feel like you said this, and I do agree with you, that there is going to be a bit of a renaissance on the other side of this thing, because a lot of people are probably like I am, like holed up, you know, actually figuring out artistically what they want to do, what they want to be without the distractions of daily work. And I feel like, you know, when this thing releases eventually, whatever that may be, whenever, it's going to be a renaissance, man. You agree with that?
Well, I think we're in the middle of a renaissance as well,
Yes.
right? There's two sides of this. I mean, I'm just going to put it in the most basic terms. I think that we're in the middle of the introverts renaissance, because the programming and the scheduling of things that are so unnatural for them, right? For maybe, like you were saying, guys like you who are naturally loners, who want to kind of sit and reflect on their own. This is your renaissance, right? And I think we're seeing that with the stuff that you've been putting out in the world. And then on the other side, it's undeniable. And we're going to just kind of slightly pop out of the atmosphere of music for a moment. But it would say that you live in Shanghai, or you live in Mumbai, or you live in LA. You're seeing the stars and the mountains, and you're breathing clean air for the first time in your life.
Yes.
And having that firsthand experience is undeniable.
Yes.
Right? So you're not going to be able to go back and say, well, remember that beautiful moment. Was it just a dream? No, it was not a dream, because this is going to last long enough to become deeply ingrained into our souls. And we're going to say, you know what? We have to start making those big moves. And I mean, there's a billion big political things that are going to come out of this. But I think one of the biggest is an awakening for the importance of looking after our environment. Because it's undeniable. You can just breathe. You can breathe. And traffic as well, right? Public transportation is, people are going to be like, well, so that's what it means to actually have clear roads. Oh, I can actually get around town in 15 minutes the way it's supposed to be, right? When infrastructure is built at the capacity that it should be, or public transportation exists the way it should be. There's just going to be so many insights that come out of this. And for the musicians, we're all going to be able to share in this universal plight for decades to come, as something we can reflect upon. I mean, in the same way the Great Depression was, in the same way Spanish flu was, in the same way World War II was, in the same way Vietnam War was, everybody was talking about the same nugget. And that creates a collectivity and a universal thread that everyone can tie into, and that creates a more tightly knit human fabric. And that's, you know, we're going to see, and we have to make sure that the deaths stay as low as humanly possible, but that's going to be one of those great silver linings that come out of this tragic moment.
And also, it's very possible this could be looked back. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
this could be looked back on down the road as the golden age of American family, and families everywhere, not just America. But like how many people are figuring out who their wife and kids are for the first time right now, with no distractions from work and the rat race and craziness of life.
No,
This
it's
there are things, as horrible as all this is, Josh. There are things when it's all gone that people will miss about it. You know what I mean?
yeah. No, it's speaking with some of my friends who have children and who maybe had been so caught up in their busy and dynamic lives and for good reason, right? There's no shame in working hard and trying to provide for your family, but that time is so precious, and I'm so glad that you have this kind of time with your family where you guys can
Thank you.
actually sit there eye to eye. And you're not, I know that you tend to go on the road. You've been on the road with Vince and Joe Walsh and dozens of others, and ah, I'm just so glad you have that time, man. I'm
Thank
so
you,
glad
man.
that you have that time, and for
It's
so many
interesting.
musicians.
Oh, thank you, man.
Yeah,
It's interesting to watch the kids. The way they're handling all this. I got a 7-year-old and 4-year-old boy, and you know, we've had our 7-year-old in first grade in a Williamson County school, a highly respected school, and there's been things about the way he's been handling being in that school that my wife and I are both kind of like, it doesn't seem like he's really being himself. He's being pressured into being in the part of a system, a very organized, rigid system, and I feel like this, watching him mentally develop over the last 6 weeks. It's like my wife even said, he's finally turning into the kid that I always thought he was. His artistic expression and he's been playing the ukulele constantly. And he's so artistic and he's doing all this crazy projects and stuff. And it's like, wow, maybe this is the type of life that he needs. Maybe he needs to be homeschooled. We would never have an opportunity to test this way unless something horrible like this happened, right?
oh man. Well,
And then
there is a defined path, and just to tack on to that, it sounds to me like you're saying, and this is my understanding of it, education is read, remember, regurgitate, with very
yes,
little room for ask questions, create, and propagate. And
I,
I'm so that what a trip to see that.
yeah, and now imagine this, right? Like, how weird would it be for a family of like our family? Let's just say a wife, a father, and 2 kids and a dog to check out of society for 6, 8 weeks and just stay home and do like what we're all doing now. If everybody wasn't doing it, how weird would it be? It would be like you would feel this terrible pressure, like this is, oh God, we should be out working, we should be out. It would put this guilt to everybody. It makes it special in a way, and I'm not trying to sound insensitive to the horrors that are going on. I know a lot of people are suffering. Please don't take this wrong. I don't mean to be taken out of context. I'm just saying, in the core of the family, this is a pretty special thing, right? And it can, and it's also frustrating because you're locked up with your kids 24/7 every day, and all parents know that gets to be a bit overwhelming at times.
Hmm.
But it's like it's also magical, you know.
Well, there's a reason that there's a correlation between tragedy and patriotism,
Hmm.
because we're all in this together. And in the midst of
Yes,
this tragedy, I know that you're not taking it lightly. I know that nobody is really taking this lightly. But we still have to see the magic in the midst of the madness.
yes,
Because if we can't appreciate the magic, there's
right.
very little reason to be alive.
Now, Josh, let me ask you, as a man who I know is very concerned about the environment, and is like, my wife is the same way. I mean, you guys could talk for hours. I'm concerned. I'm not as worried and freaked out as she is. You know, she you know, like she's very, very, very conscious of all this stuff. And like, do you think that this sort of forward push for, you know, cleaning the environment and all the things that this sort of, you know, pandemic is putting upon us will maintain, hopefully, won't it, when things go back to normal? Please
Well,
tell me it will. Please tell me, Josh.
no, I'm not going to tell you that because I don't think it's entirely true. I think that we're on a trajectory with consumer demand, not necessarily governmental understanding. There's still so much corruption in politics that at the end of the day, the power brokers are all fed by the Exxon Mobils of the world, right? You look at their financial reporting, and it's crystal clear. But there's a big difference between the corruption of our government, which does have the potential to play a big role in the cleanup and to putting us on the right path. And then there's true consumer demand and the innovation that happens from regular human beings to get there. And I'm much more bullish on the ability of regular human beings, for the community, to demand these things than for there be a great awakening in our political system. And the one caveat I'd put on there is I think that we are closing in on a time where enough people are getting hip to the corruption that we might actually start passing some laws to set either campaign spending limits or to get nasty corporate money out of politics. And this will help DC and our state legislators and our city councils to be a reflection of our will rather than a reflection of the will of the multinational, multi-billion-dollar polluters.
Right.
So there's a reason that you can have a casual conversation with just about anybody about climate science today. And it's not because they teach it in school, which is where the government would come in, right? Our campaign before the pandemic hit would visit schools on a near weekly basis. And we would just sit and listen to kids and their insight on the environment. And I'm surprised by how little they learned in school. And then you give them a couple stats, right? You talk about how much ocean acidification there is, or coral bleaching, or how many fish are just dying. And they instantaneously get it and they get hip to it. And you can give them a few little examples. It's like, oh, imagine inhaling car exhaust. Wouldn't that make you feel dizzy? Well, the environment feels dizzy when we do this at this big scale like this. And they get hip to it really quick. So I'm much more I have much more faith in the community led than the governmental led, until eventually through osmosis excuse me, they are replaced by real humans. But there's, you know, just look at the roster of Congress right now, with the just the median age and the median wealth of the people who are in DC. It's just not even remotely close to what's really going on, right? In a state like Tennessee, where the median income's in the 30,000s, and then you go to Capitol Hill, and these guys, you know, personally, my opponent's worth tens of millions of dollars, and that's not even a rarity, right? And it's just, they just have no idea what's going on. And I think that's going to change quickly. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I believe in you. I believe in your friends. I believe in our networks. And I don't trust the government. And that has a lot to do with the fact that that's why part of the reason I'm running is because I feel like there still is a modicum of real democracy where at least the votes get counted legitimately. Right? The proportionality of money in your bank account to the amount of votes that you'll get is still really there, right? And these guys are stacked with cash, dirty cash too. It's not even real. But you got to keep on keeping on and keep the fight up and keep your chin up, smile on, and fight for real humans. So I think that's part of what we're working on. And I think that's what we'll see at the end of this, is that the people will demand it, and Congress is going to be about the same. Yeah. I think.
You're right, Josh. Man, that sounds right to me, man.
Yeah, so it's real, man. It's a real danger. And you know, as you know, our mutual friend Joe Glazer is a great environmental thinker, and he's also got his fingers in and upper and lower echelons. He knows how to balance those worlds, and I think that he would second that argument. And but he's also the kind of guy who puts his money where his mouth is, and he'll invest. And I know that we all have to invest in the green future that we want. But I'll say this, I mean, how are your musician friends? Just to switch the subject a little bit, how are your
Yeah,
musician friends sustaining right now? What's going on with them? Are they
man,
surviving? What's going on?
I've had the random conversations here and there with different guys, and it's like it seems to be across the board. There's no one way they're all feeling. They're all a little bit different. Some are more worried than others.
Right.
Some are more active than others. There's some guys who I know who work wise you wouldn't even know anything happened. They've got home studios and they're constantly busy because everyone's sending them tracks. And then there's other guys like me who don't have any sort of home recording setup that, I haven't been in the studio in almost 2 months, so that's okay. I probably needed a little break. Actually, it's good for the head, once in a while to take a little break. I don't think humans were wired to be in the studio 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. It's a little too intense. So I think it all depends. I had a chat with a dear friend 2 days ago. He's a real successful keyboard player and producer, and he was saying he's really worried about like the sort of touring musicians. The guys who are sort of like uh, maybe like considered the third tier of the session guys. That mainly make most of their living on the road and stuff. He said those are the guys that are really going to be wiped out by this because there's not going to be any touring. The session guys can always sort of find a way to work somehow. But these poor touring guys, what are they going to do? I mean, have you talked to any of those guys?
Yeah, I sure have. I mean, I think about, and I hope he doesn't mind me using his name, but I think about my buddy, like a Parker Millsap, right?
Yeah,
Who's really a touring musician, right? He's a grinding day in, day out player. But he makes his money on the road. He sells T-shirts and he sells tickets, and he subsidizes, or his primary income is on the road, right? I think about even my own band, right? I've been playing in this group for the last 10 years, but the guys in my band, they really make up their living by playing with a bunch of different groups and doing weekend shows and stuff like that. And man, they've been living on rice and beans, you know?
yeah, and
And
I'm worried
yeah,
people in the restaurant business too. Like I've got a dear friend, one of my best friends, who owns two amazing restaurants. Yeah, he worked his ass off to make those places amazing. And every time I talk to him, it's just like, dude, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it through this. It's heartbreaking, man.
yeah. Well, the restaurant industry is, what is it, Skylar? What percentage of restaurants tend to fail in the first year? It's a majority, right? We had a campaign manager, is a brilliant dude, Skylar Bush, but he's a trained chef and he's worked a lot of great restaurants. But I mean, it's already really difficult to have a sustainable restaurant concept. Now, imagine if you just dumped your life savings into a project now, right? And your whole world was supposed to crescendo right now. You're supposed to be hitting the road, cranking out your grub and facilitating community. Wow, are you not in a really challenging position? And our government has just come up so short for us, man. And I am impressed by some, right? I think about the Cafe Rose and the Fat Bites, and I think about Mitchell's Deli and Eighth and Roast and all these great establishments throughout Nashville who have opened back up, and they're trying to serve the community. And I'll say this to everybody who's watching right now: if you've got the dough, get to go, because this is the only way they're making money right now.
Sure.
Right? Go buy to-go food. It's okay. Support your local restaurants. Go to Grubhub or go up to their walk-up window. It's safe. It's okay. Buy food from local restaurants because they need you right now. But you can only imagine the folks who are ready to start their businesses. I mean, you see these restaurant projects just in limbo. They're paused. It's a complete tragedy, man. It's a complete tragedy. Yeah. And for so many, And one day I was chatting with somebody yesterday. It's this I got a great neighbor. And one thing that came out of that, she's known somebody who's died from COVID every single day this week.
Jesus.
Every single day this week. And she told me this really sad story about her friends who both this woman, both her mother and her daughter died in the same week. And it turns out that she was the silent carrier for the disease. Right? And it's no coincidence that this woman who's deeply tied into the Black community in Nashville is telling stories about, folks in that community who are dying by the day. And it's unthinkable what's happening. And I mean, this is just true across the board, regardless of race or anything. But frankly, the predictor of your socioeconomic status and the length of your stick before the pandemic, your stick only gets shorter when things like this come around. And they are hurting really, really bad. And it's really, really real. And for those who are lucky enough to be able to sustain and have enough money in the bank and enough food in the pantry, I'm telling you, reach out to your people. And this is your time to overflow with love, grace, generosity, and let God flow through you. Whatever your energetic grounding is, let it flow through you and help those folks out, because it's unbelievable the pain. Unbelievable the pain. To have that guilt of knowing that you're a silent carrier and you're passing this thing along. It's just, and now the states are starting to open back up, and we saw a huge spike in cases yesterday. It's just disgusting the way that we're approaching this. So it's yeah, man, it's tough, buddy. It's tough.
I know no one knows. I know you only be speculating, but you're an intelligent man, Josh. How long do you think this is all going to go on?
All right. So I've been lucky enough, and this is not my intelligence. I've just been lucky enough to speak with really smart people. I think about my buddy Andy Brooks, who we actually had on this program about a month ago. He reads all the research. He follows every paper, the breaking news, and every bit. At the end of the day, there is no getting past this until not only we have a vaccine, but we have a vaccine that has hit enough people to create, he wouldn't call it herd immunity, so this is now no more Andy, but to create that herd immunity where you can no longer create big spikes and surges in the deathly case counts. But in my view, and if I were in government now, this is what I would be supporting. An analysis of each and every human being in this country, give them an antibody test, find out whether or not they've had the disease, right? Once you find out if they've had the disease, you put them on one side, you give them the green light, because Fauci and all my scientist friends believe that it's probably unlikely that you can get this thing twice. And if you can get it twice, it's probably not right away. So you'll at least have it, you'll be secure for at least some amount of time, some amount of months. So put those people to a side. Now, next, identify folks who are very low risk based on the numbers. So that means if you're young and you don't have underlying health conditions, you've got you don't have hypertension or diabetes or underlying heart condition, and they do an analysis of your genetics, put those people in that green light bucket as well, because they're very unlikely to get very ill and die from this. And then identify all the people who are high risk and invest massively, because this is the only way to financially do this properly. You can't just keep sending out $1,000, $2,000 checks every single month to every single person. I think that the healthy people get back to work, and the folks who have already been through this get back to work, and they get the green light. Now, the folks who are high risk, we double down on their investment, and we make sure that they get that $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 a month. We make sure that they can't be foreclosed on. We make sure that they can't be kicked out of their houses. And we make sure that they have the PPE, and they have free grocery delivery. This is what a society is supposed to do, is look out for the most vulnerable.
Yes.
So it's a really simple thing. And I can't believe nobody on Capitol Hill is talking about this. Identify those who are the highest risk and give them the kitchen sink because they need it right now, because there's no stable path for them for at least a year, 2 years. The fastest vaccine turnaround is 4 years. So to think we're going to get this thing in 18 months anyways is really it's a bold statement, very unlikely. So we have to do everything we can for them. So that's my view on this timeline. Yeah, it's
So
yeah,
you think
it's
like
wacky.
all this stuff that people are saying about, just a massive second wave spike in the fall, that's all going to happen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're seeing it.
Yeah.
We're seeing it, man. I mean, here's the thing: you can't open up Tennessee and have Nashville closed, because it's just like having Nashville open as far as case count is concerned. Because it only takes these little bubbles, right?
Right.
People who live and work in Williamson County are coming to Nashville, right? They're touching the same gas pumps that everyone else is touching for those critical grocery store visits that might require a fill up en route to boot scoot and take care of yourself. You can't do that. It just doesn't work that way. You have to have at least a regional plan. But these little local plans, which tend to be the best thing, truly, I'm a local guy. I'm a local government guy pretty much all the way. But in this particular situation, there's no public health policy that's based on little pockets of 700,000 people, right? It has to be a much bigger region than that to be safe. But it's, it's crazy. How your kids doing right now, man? I mean, I know that they were probably used to the routine of going to school and take care of this. I'm glad that they've been able to explore their creative passions and stuff like that. What's that been like for them?
It's just so weird hearing like little kids talk about COVID-19 and stuff. My wife just said it. It's just so weird. It's like, no, we can't. And they're like, well, we can't do that because of the virus. It's like, I mean, kids need structure and normalcy, and this is far from that, Josh. This is far from that. I'm just hoping that, like I've got a couple friends who've got, 18-year-old kids that are just getting done with school and stuff, and all their hopes of going to college are getting screwed up, and like, all their dreams are just dying right before our eyes. All the things that they wanted to do. These guys are so young that they'll be able to adapt to anything. But I'm more worried about the kids that are sort of just kind of starting their life out. You know what I mean? That's it's just such a weird time for them. They're not going to go to college? What's going to happen? What's that going to be like?
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, people, the graduating class of Belmont just went through this week.
Yeah.
And they're still graduating. They're still getting out. But one thing that we saw from the 2007, 2008 financial crisis is there is no recovering from this, right? There's some really good academic studies that looks at people who are graduating university or graduating high school during the financial crisis. And when you look at their trajectory through life, it's been permanently inhibited by the amount of money that they make, by the amount of children that they have, by their ability to buy a house. That's going to be true. If you got a big stick, your stick is still big, right? That's the thing. If you're rich, you're rich. If you're poor, you're poor. And if you're poor in this moment, you're going to get hit way harder. And it's going to be a permanent setback for any climbing that you've been doing.
At that point, that will never be fixed. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. There's no. The thing is, because it's so universal.
Yeah.
And this is more universal than most anything else. It's global. There's going to have to be an asterisk on everybody's education history.
Yes.
And an understanding of what age they were when this pandemic hit to explain their gaps in education and their gaps in employment and their credit score and everything, right? Every single metric that we look at, there's going to have to be an asterisk saying, oh, okay, right. It was so universal. I get it, right? You didn't work for 6 months. You didn't work for a year. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. But at the end of the day, that upward trajectory for the folks who are still working right now, they're just getting ahead. There's no catching up. Once you're a year ahead of somebody, the person who was supposed to be on your same path, but who wasn't able to get on the train in time, they're always going to be behind.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way. I see what you mean.
you know, you follow. It's like racing. Imagine you're in an F1 race, and
Right.
someone gets a year to start the race, and then you get in your car,
Yeah.
right?
They don't
You're
even
racking up cash, you're making
see it.
connections, all
Yeah.
that stuff. You're reading and thinking, and you're building your resume. Like humans, at the end of the day, humans are what they are. They're still going to look at this, and they're not going to they're not going to be able to nuance this thing enough,
Yeah.
you know. And it disproportionately hurts those who are already in socioeconomically disenfranchised situations,
Yeah.
right? So it's the poor. When we do a big retrospective on this, Tom,
Yes.
guess what? We're going to see that the folks, pretty much, the poor minorities are going to get the worst part of this, right? As they always do, right? As they always do. We still have structural racism in our society that makes it just more difficult based on the melanin in your skin to start or begin. And this is not going to help that. This is going to hurt that big time. And that's why we have to just really, we have to have proportional investment. If you went to a school in a majority minority neighborhood, it's already statistically worse than others. And yeah, you know what?
Structural. I
It's
never heard
tough.
that term. It's fascinating. Structural racism. Wow.
Yeah, it's structural. There's architecture to everything in our life, right?
Yeah.
If there is racism, there's structure to racism, right? And we know there is. So there has to be some sort of supporting framework in society to eventually get you there. It's based on ebbs, flows, momentums, perceptions. All these things they play a huge role in who becomes successful in our society. And I think that we're starting to get past it. Thankfully, as we're seeing, you know, as our generation starts to take over, and I actually hate this term, but I'm still going to use it. We're still not colorblind, but we're a lot more colorblind
Right.
than previous generation, and that's going to continue to happen.
Yeah.
So that'll be a kind of
Does
a
it
decent and positive thing.
does it not amaze you the human spirit, the resilience of humans? Like it's only been not even 2 months. The way something this weird happens and everyone's sort of like getting used to it. Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
I mean, like it's like aliens could and take over, and like for a couple of weeks it'd be like, wow, and then everybody would just be like, well, okay, the aliens are here. It's like people are amazing at their ability to adapt to things. It's like it's mind blowing. I mean, it's like it's almost like I don't know what like the human spirit is pretty incredible, right?
I'm sure you've seen this. I'm guessing you've had friends who have had big bumps in their life, right? Where they went from making regular scratchy money to making big money in a year, right?
Yep.
So I'm sure you've seen this firsthand. It is a trip though. How quickly they get used to the 7,000 square foot house with the 3 cars in the garage is
Yeah.
pretty insane. And how quickly they think that's the normal and they forget about all that stuff that happened in their past, right? Some people are immune to it, but I'd say most people just kind of get lost in the sauce real fast. And so it works on a negative and a positive side.
Well,
Give one of your buddies a AMG Mercedes, right? And see what happens to them in 3 weeks,
mhm.
right? But on the flip side, give the globe a pandemic and see how strong we become so fast. It just shows that we're uh, we're resilient and we're adaptive, but we're just so easily persuaded by our very present circumstances.
Yes.
You know,
You
it's easy to forget where we come from.
Oh Lord, I think like most musicians, I mean, I can only speak for musicians because that's all I know.
Sure.
It's all I've ever been. It's just I think musicians are sort of trained since birth, to be conservative, right? I mean, I've always sort of innately known that you know if you do get a windfall for whatever reason, it's a brief thing. Don't get too excited about it, and sort of hide some acorns away for future winners. You know, I think musician rules don't really apply the way they do to some other occupations. I've always encouraged any friends of mine, that are musicians, lifelong musicians, to just be very conservative and don't get ahead of yourself. Don't overextend yourself. Pay off whatever you can pay off. If you can't afford to buy something cash, don't buy it because you can't afford it. That's what I've always lived by, that rule. And I've always told all my friends to do the same thing. And, and it's good, solid, old school advice, and, I feel like I, I feel sorry for anyone who sort of extended themselves way too much before this thing happened. You know what I'm saying? It's if you're playing it close to the vest, you're probably going to survive this a little better than another guy for a while. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, 100%. We saw that with the stimulus checks. That was the ultimate example, right? You saw some people who understood what that meant, that was that acorn, that they had to treat that preciously. But I'd still say for a majority of the people I know, and probably the majority of people in this country, they saw that and they were like, well, it's time to buy something, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of forgot that this could last for a long time. And you kind of stay with it. Hey, I'm curious, where did you get that mentality, right? Who told you to kind of play it close to the chest?
My older brother. I have 4 older siblings. My older brother Mike is 7 years older than me. He's very, very, very smart, very practical, intelligent dude. And he helped me move down to Nashville when I was a young kid. He drove. I had 2 cars at the time, 2 junk cars, and he drove one of them down. And I never even had a bank account or anything at that point. He was there. Go get a bank account. Don't get a credit card. If you can't afford to pay cash for something, don't buy it. And just live live beneath your means, man. Just always be conservative. And I've lived by that rule my whole life. I've another saying that I heard a long time ago. This wasn't from my brother Mike. I can't even remember where I heard this, but I have applied this to the nth degree. An old saying that said, "Rich people buy assets, poor people buy liabilities." You ever heard that one?
I've never heard that. I love. I mean, it's a strong statement.
It's truth, man. I mean, you got to watch what you're spending your money on. If you're blowing your money on a bunch of stuff that requires constant maintenance, it's going down in value. Clothes, things that aren't worth nearly what you paid for them. It's a bleeding. It's just it's a hole where all the money goes, man. And my wife, she always calls me like an old school Slovenian gangster. That's what she always calls me, because I'm like, I've always kept things very, very sort of, keep it very conservative. I've always tried to do that. And I think that's good advice for anyone, and especially musicians, because there's no such thing as security in the world of being a musician. It can all be taken away at any second. I've never had 1 second of security in my whole life, and I never expected to get one. And it's like, I don't even know what that would be like to have even a minute of a feeling of security. Josh.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, you know what? And that is, I think that you hang out with such a diverse group of musicians. And would you say that that's, you're speaking to the instability of the musical career path. I mean, do most people take this? Do most people believe what you're saying?
Yeah, I would reckon they do. I mean, if they don't, they're kidding themselves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you get to some point where you're so successful that you've got billions stashed away or whatever. I mean, but that's what is that? 0.00001% of all musicians.
Right.
I think any ordinary working stiff musician like myself, man, you got to be constantly like on the lookout, man, and don't ever get too comfortable. I always tell people, don't ever put all your eggs in one basket. do not ever get yourself in a situation where you're working for only one guy, and that could be terminated down the road. I've always been very keen to sort of open up as many possible avenues for income as I possibly could. You know, so that if a couple of them dry up at some point, it doesn't even affect you because you've got all these other watering holes, you know, that you could go to. You know, I've seen a lot of musician friends of mine get a very comfortable gig, a road gig or something, where they're making good money, and they milk it for 15, 20 years, and they let all their other things dry up. They're not doing any sessions. They're not out actively networking with anybody else. And then all of a sudden, one day that gig's over. And then what do you do then? I mean, I've seen desperate people calling me going, dude, I just got fired by so-and-so, you know, and it's like, dude, sorry, man, but it was very short-sighted of you to put all your eggs in that one basket. Don't ever do that when you're a musician. I'm telling all you kids out there, anybody that maybe don't do that. Don't do that. Always keep it where you've got all kind of things going on. That's the thing.
Well, Tom, with that nugget of genius, we'll go and sign off. And I'd love to continue this conversation and maybe have another conversation with you here in a couple of weeks as this thing progresses, as we get more stories in, because your mentality and your insight is undeniable. And you're, you know, for a guy who plays it so close to the chest, you're also so generous, and you're also such a bright light for the music community and for the world at large. And I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to ongoing collaboration.
Absolutely. It's been fun. I wish I could see you on the screen.
Yeah, I know. We'll get that figured out next time.
Okay.
All right. Talk to you soon, brother. Have a safe and beautiful day.
Wait, what do I do? Just hit leave meeting here? Is that what I do?
Yeah, I'm just going to end it. It'll end it for both of us.
All right.
Peace. Bye-bye.
Take care, Josh.
Take care, buddy.
See you, buddy.